Welcome to the Sustainable Clinical Medicine podcast. I am your host, Sarah Smith. I am a practicing rural family physician and the charting coach. This is the podcast for physicians and advanced practice providers who are ready to step back from the busyness of their clinical day to share ideas, question everything, and redesign their clinical day. We are redesigning clinical medicine to create sustainable clinical days and create time for our lives outside of medicine. Join us for discussions with world experts who are helping design sustainable models of clinical medicine and the physicians or clinicians who have discovered or designed sustainable models of clinical medicine for themselves. Well, hello, everybody. And today I have a very special guest with us, Dr. Kay, who I will get to introduce herself in just a moment, was my teacher for trauma-informed coaching. I went into this program with her thinking I would learn something to help the people and physicians that I help, and ended up realizing it was for me. The way that the program set up is slow immersion. And one thing we realize is that when it comes to trauma-informed, what I didn't understand is that it is universal, and we have a whole lot of things that we are exposed to within our lives and careers that a trauma-informed lens was very helpful for, but I found it almost more for me than for everyone else. Yeah. But I was thankful for the skills to help with the people I help. So welcome, Dr. Kay. I will let you introduce yourself.
Oh, thank you. You know, I started grinning the second you said that because I knew exactly where the conversation was going to go at that moment, right? Which is, and it's meant to be that way. Mm-hmm. It's meant to be that way, right? Yeah. That we are in this process of discovery, and that the skills associated with trauma responsive engagement, it's an inside out process. Mm-hmm. It begins with recognizing what is going on with us so that we can recognize what we see in others. So that is not an introduction of me, but just the delight in getting to hear that from you, because it speaks exactly to the design of the professional development that we're trying to do. I've stopped calling things training. I've really stopped calling anything that we do training, because I decided one day, I was like, I train animals. I train a dog. I develop people, right? And it felt more appropriate to the work that we engage in. So you gave me such a lovely, in transparency to your audience, we got to chat before she hit record, and she said, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Which is very trusting and quite dangerous, I will say. And I'm delighted to do that. And it's got me thinking a little bit, because I notice that when other people read my bio, I always shrink a little in my chair and think, oh, please stop. This is not the interesting stuff, right? So what's the interesting stuff? What's the interesting stuff? The stuff we say are the things like, I'm a physician, I'm an internist, I'm a public health professional. I did all my undergraduate and graduate medical education at the University of Utah. I did my internal medicine residency at Barnes Hospital, so that was a big change. And then my husband, and I was already married at this point, my husband and I moved to Central Illinois, where we now live on a farm. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is interesting. We have 4, I call them my semi-feral sons. My friends would say they're mostly feral, so semi is probably generous. And my physician husband and I have now been here for 20 years. I'm a PGY 25. I think that's interesting, right? I'm a PGY 25, and I am adjunct faculty at the medical school here, Southern Illinois University School of Medicine. Where I'm duly appointed in the Office of Medical Humanities, and also in the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, where I am really tasked with bringing trauma-responsive engagement and coaching and programming and that lens to everything that we do. And that's a really critically important role, because racism is trauma, right? And oppression is trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And so engaging, when we're going to engage in and be the architects, particularly if we are the architects of that anti-oppression work, to do it out of a trauma responsive container is really, really important. So I love that. And then the bulk of my time and life are spent, aside from those things, as the president and CEO of a company called Lodestar. And there, we have been very deeply engaged in the coach development. We have a series of, well, they're called coach training, aren't they? Of advanced coaching skills, really, for those who are looking for sort of that next skill set in their coaching. And really have expanded that offering to offer those trauma mitigation master classes in a lot of different areas, for HR, for EDI. So for professionals who are working in the legal profession, professionals working in a lot of different spaces. And then the absolute bulk of our work as a company is in leadership development, in advanced leadership development. And that has been incredibly powerful and meaningful engagement, because as with our coaching work, what we notice is as we engage in this slower, closer work over time, right? And leadership begins to gain these skills, this perspective, this additional, not just knowledge. Knowledge matters, awareness, and talent in navigating all of it. These have really become clear to me as the essential skills that any human hoping to understand and navigate well with each other today are going to need. And for all of the reasons that you already outlined, because we need it for ourselves. And we need it to show up as the best version of ourselves with each other. That was a very long introduction.
Yes and no. I mean, we understand more about who you are and what you do, which is important. And you're a mum of boys, which I am too, and we have small farms together, so that's fun.
Yeah.
We both had those. When I was learning about trauma, what I was so fascinated about to start with, one of the things that was interesting was that trauma doesn't look like somebody who's sad at the workplace. Like it shows up and it can look like something that you're not expecting from your colleagues, for instance, like anger or short-temperedness, doing things in a way they haven't historically been known for, could actually be an expression of trauma. Do you want to take us through kind of what that looks like from your perspective?
Yeah, such an important noticing. I'm gonna go back in time a little bit,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
then circle around to this, because I think it's really important for our physician colleagues for anyone, and especially for our physician colleagues to have some awareness around, because historically there's been this desire to kind of like stay back, right? Trauma is those people over there. For anyone who really has awareness of it. Probably the group of our colleagues who have the greatest awareness around trauma are going to be our pediatrician colleagues, right? Because they're going to know the adverse childhood experiences study. They're going to have some awareness about the impact of ACEs and the impact of ACEs on health over a lifetime. And, right, what I love to do when starting there is remind everyone that if you go back and you read the original ACEs study, Adverse Childhood Experiences study, which was a massive study, 17,500 responses, right? And 10 questions. Now, I sometimes refer to these as the big 10. If you look at that initial study, you'll see there's 10 after that, and 10 after that, and 10 after that, right? But the first study was the big 10. But you look at the phrasing of the question in the original study, and what you see is it says, those who before their 18th birthday experienced or witnessed. We tend to overlook this and think about just what is the experience part of it, and forget that bearing witness to, being proximate to, harm in others, uh, can land as harm in us also. All right, so there's that piece. Now I'm going to go back to 2016. At that point in time, I had been building really a lot of public health programming that all had a trauma informed. So that was the terminology. All had a very trauma informed lens to it for about a decade plus. And in 2016, I went through a coaching certification process, became a certified coach, and thought, well, one of the things I want to do is I am noticing that a lot of our colleagues are experiencing significant burnout. And I'm going to do, just as a little small side thing, some coaching for physicians who are experiencing burnout. So I began doing that type of coaching. Those are my people, right? And I was probably a year into it, seeing some really great results from physician clients, starting to build on this. And the thing that I began really becoming aware of was that these symptoms that were being labeled as burnout were indistinguishable from the symptoms that we see when trauma is showing up, right? Phenotypically, right? It was something beyond burnout is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter because the coaching approach that I was taking had that very trauma responsive lens to it, because I didn't know how to engage with somebody without being that way. By that point in my life, that was just a part of how I showed up. And after a few years of this, some of the organizations that I was working with were starting to ask for, and the clients too were starting to ask for, can you teach this, right? Can you teach how to do this type of coaching and engagement? And, well, yeah, I mean, that's what I used to do, but I don't know how to do it in coaching. So we built this trauma response we call it the Trauma Mitigation Masterclass for coaches. And it was fascinating to me that as people began going through this class, what we noticed is exactly what you described, right? Which is folks would come in thinking they were going to get knowledge, and they came out realizing they'd had a transformative experience. Gained knowledge, yes.
Yes.
Gained skills, yes.
Yes.
And it's been how many years since you went through?
Oh, two or
3?
three, at least. Yeah, I
I
think
think,
3. I'm gonna say
right?
3.
3 years.
Yeah.
I'm willing to bet that if I were to ask you a specific statistic or something that I taught in the class specifically, you'd be like, yeah, it was 3 years ago. But you remember what it felt.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
And
So
the
what
deep
you,
depth of
yeah,
conversations and the being listened to and the ability to offload a story in a space that was safe and protected.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes, right? And so as we continue to progress and build these skill sets out, what we come to realize, and I think this is what I realized very early on as a coach, coaching physicians, is how isolated we have become as clinicians. And this is pre-2020, right? I'm talking even before the pandemic, which accelerated things, but the pandemic is not what broke things.
No.
Right? It just sort of took all these fissures and shattered, but all of the pieces were already cracked. The degree to which we are training, and then the reality that comes after training, begins to isolate us, both internally and sort of away from ourselves and from each other, is really a challenge to overcome. And it happens by degree. It's not like all of a sudden one day we're sort of ripped out and put over here and then everything changes and we all notice it. It's that more of the frog in the pot of boiling water phenomenon, right? Where by degree, we sort of drift away from, or our attention gets pulled over, and one day we wake up and we're like, why am I so miserable? Okay. So when we traditionally think about trauma, and this is why I brought the ACEs study up in the first place. When we traditionally think about trauma as a human population, right? What we traditionally think about are those moments in time. Well, it's something that we can all look at, put our finger down on and say, that's trauma, right? Agreement, because it's an event, right? What we don't think about as often, as frequently, and what is, I think, far more insidious than the events that we can all look to is the exposure, right? We learn in medical school the dose makes the poison. First year of pharmacology, first day, right? Professor steps up and he says something to the effect of, Sarraf, I could kill you today by making you drink too much water, right? Drink too much water, too short a time period, throws you into disequilibrium, you end up in the ICU. It's a truth we all know. What I think we have failed to appreciate, right, is that the cumulative compounding dose of toxic stress made worse by some very specific things, loss of control, right? Isolation, lack of resources, lack of rest, lack of time to process, even, never mind like actual sleep rest, lack of time to even process the experiences that we're having. Uncertainty is hugely amplifying of stress. I could spend, in fact, I just spent 2 whole workshops up in Minnesota talking about the impact of uncertainty, just uncertainty on the brain, right? So we begin to look at all of these things, and it is amplified over time. The dose makes the poison. So then we begin to see that stress, that thing that we all know is good for us, that we need to experience at the right pace, at the right time, when it moves into that space where it is really high, which isn't in and of itself damaging, right? Residency was very, very, very high stress. I did not experience residency as it was sometimes toxic. I didn't experience it as traumatic. And there's a reason I didn't, when other people who were going through the same residency program with me at the same time did, right?
Yeah.
So we start to look at that toxic stress. You stay in that for too long, it begins to move along that continuum. It can become embodied in us as trauma. There's a continuum of this. This is really important for us to understand and begin to talk about honestly. Resmaa Menakem gives us what I think is the most complete definition of trauma that we have currently, when he says that trauma is anything that happens too much, too fast, too soon, too long. Too much, too fast, too soon, too long. There's a second half to that equation. Without enough. Without enough of what we needed that would have felt resourcing. Okay. Now here's where coaching gets really fun, right? Because we tend to think about resources as stuff. Right? Resources as stuff. As enough PPE, that is true. Enough ventilators. I mean, all those things, right? A lot of times though, so there's a little bit of that matters. Money. Let's never say that money doesn't matter, right? Money is a resource, right? And when you begin to look at what has been studied as the biggest disruptors of toxic stress, right? Psychological safety, trust, rest, right? Choice, control, a sense of choice or a sense of control, and connection. I didn't have to pay for any of those things, right? Those are things that if I understand that those are very effective disruptors of toxic stress, I can begin to seek, to build, to implement, to offer to others connection, right? We can't always offer certainty. We can always offer clarity, even if we can't offer certainty. Right? I don't know what is going to happen next, and I will check in with you in the next 24 hours. I don't know what is going to happen next, and here are the steps we do know, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all of these things are incredibly disruptive of toxic stress. They are resourcing, is what I'm saying. And yet we don't often look to or for those things because we're quite fixated, right, on the resources that are tangible that we don't have access, we may or may not have access to, and on sort of those bigger events. When we broaden our perspective in this way, when we begin to understand that secondary trauma, right, experienced or witnessed, lands in the exact same way in my body, activates the exact same pathways in my brain because of limbic resonance. Vicarious trauma, even those traumas I'm absorbing from the stories I watch or listen to that I'm many degrees of separation from, and the traumas of moral injury, right? Which arise from a different place, right? Primary, secondary, vicarious trauma, those are traumas that are from the outside at us.
Mm-hmm.
The traumas of moral injury land in the body in the same way. However, they arise from inside of us, right? That's the harm that comes up because we are unable to do or live or practice medicine or engage in accordance with who we believe we are. There's a mismatch between who I'm meant to be and who I am, right? How I'm showing up. One of the most common refrains I hear from the folks that we work with, and this cuts across sector, right? This is not just physicians. This is hospital leadership. This is in public health. This is in education. This is in all kinds of fields. The most common refrain we hear is, I didn't go into to become this.
Mm.
I didn't go into this profession to become this person who is short-tempered, this person who is angry all the time, this person who who hates their patient. I've heard that more times than I can count. And they don't, and they resent what the work is doing to them, right? Who is snapping at my nurses, who is angry, who is yelling at medical students, who is flinging clipboards. You name it, we've heard it, right?
Mm.
I didn't go into this to become this version of me. Now what? Right? Because I can't quit because I got bills and student loans and obligations. So walking away is not an option. And that's where this type of understanding and deep work becomes so valuable, because we begin to think about, what do I need to access in order for the better version or the best version of me to show up, right?
Mm.
When we don't know that these things are accessible, we're not going to look for them. Knowing, though, isn't enough.
Yeah.
Right? Simple knowledge transfer is what most of us experience going through medical school. Knowing isn't enough. Having the experience, as you talked about, knowing what it feels like, feeling the power of being held in a safe and trauma responsive container when engaging with others. That's the type of experience that begins to change us. And as healers, what we want more than anything when we've experienced healing is to heal the person next to us. That is baked into our DNA.
Mm.
So we often say that this work begins to return us to us. And from there, we're able to engage the way we want to. There's that common maxim, hurt people, and it gets tossed out there a lot, and it's absolutely true. And that's not the end of the story, because heard people hear people,
Mm.
and healing people, not healed. I'm not
Mhm.
healed. Healing people help people. And
Yeah.
that's incredibly, incredibly powerful. So I'll stop talking because I need a break, a breath, and some water.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I love this. I love how you've helped us understand the types of trauma, and therefore the way you laid it out there, we've all had that, all been exposed
Wow.
to other people's stories, significant events, and then that toxic stress, as in things that are outside of your control, like not enough of the resourcing, or having to do things in a way that doesn't feel like the way you want to do it. Like that could be as easy as given 10 minutes or 15-minute appointments to see patients when you're a nephrologist, endocrinologist, rheumatologist, family physician,
Or
like
any doctor, right?
any of the doctors, right?
That's not enough for any of
I
us to
mean,
know our patient.
right. So, I mean, throughout your training, throughout your residency, at what point did they say, and here's how you do this in 10 minutes? I don't think
Yeah.
ever. Mm-mm.
No,
No, that's
no.
and that's kind of like what I was explaining right before we came on the call, that I'm seeing this significant difference between what we were taught and how we do things in the ideal way versus what we're given, in terms of just the time limit with the patient, but also the lessening of staff or resources available physically within the space that we're in, or even the complexity of EMRs and electronic systems, right? It's all compounding amount of more.
Complexity is kind, by the way.
What is
Sorry.
kind? What is kind?
Calling it complexity. I've
Yes.
got many other words. None of them are safe for a podcast that I used to describe EMR.
I don't think yes. I think the number of swear words can be titrated with the amount of, time we're having to spend on them. Yeah. They weren't built for us.
No, they were not built to enhance the relationship between the physician and the patient.
Yeah.
And that's the pain. That's the pain I see. Honestly, that's the pain I see on your face right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's the pain that I see on my husband's face when
Mm-hmm.
he and I talk about this. This is the pain that I see with every healer in every sector. It's the
Yeah.
pain our nurses feel as well, right? And it has diminished the relationship. And listen, here's the thing. I'm not naive. I am neither. I am a businesswoman. I am not naive. The capacity to earn, right, helps the hospital stay in business. I get all of this. I know how this works. And the challenge has been that oftentimes we, because the financial is quantifiable, it is the thing that gets the attention, right?
Yeah.
I've always been more drawn to qualitative data anyway, because I think that that's where true outcomes lie, is in the qualitative data that we can gather around it. Everything about the physician and patient relationship is and should be by design sacred. I can remember, honestly, rounding as an intern at Barnes, which for those of your listeners who've never seen it, is just enormous. So I'm this kid that came from Idaho, and I was in Utah, which was a little bigger, but you get to St. Louis and you see Barnes Hospital, and it's huge and intimidating. And I can remember making rounds as a new intern, July, August, September, somewhere in there on a Sunday. And somebody saying something about it being a Sunday, and making a comment about that. And I remember, I didn't say it, but I remember this feeling of, this is holy ground I'm on right now. For me, that felt like holy ground, right? Sacred space. And I think that's how sort of idealistically we go into medicine. And I think that there's a reason for that, because we are with people in their most vulnerable times,
Mm-hmm.
right? Even if, and I'll always remember one of my professors somewhat sneeringly, when I was a medical student, somewhat sneeringly referring to the patient encounters in primary care, and how I think the number he tossed out was 80% of them are supertentorial, meaning that, the patient is just there because they think they have something going on. And I remember thinking, well, okay, right?
Yeah, okay. Is that a problem?
That's right. Exactly. I mean, I didn't understand what the problem with this was, right?
Yeah.
And I think that some of that continues to be lost, right? When we're given 10 minutes, there's not enough time to actually be the medicine that the patient needs.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the physician is the medicine. And sometimes the patients are our medicine too.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
reciprocal because of limbic resonance. And so when that relationship is ruptured by design over and over and over again, right? First, we have to notice that's happening and name it correctly. There
Mm-hmm.
has been a rupturing of my relationship with my patient, and this is true for any relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, I can't fix the system. Are there things I can do in this relationship, in this 10 minutes or 15 minutes, to restore, to do a little bit of repair? Clarity, transparency, right? A little bit of focus, slowing down where we can. These are some of the things that can help. And frankly, one of the things that we know too is simply naming things correctly also helps.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not the problem because I long for or yearn for this opportunity to have a different type or a better or a deeper connection with my patients. The system is causing harm to me and to them. It's why my patients, I mean, I hear a lot, patients are showing up mean. Patients
Mm-hmm.
are showing up mean, right? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. See? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember about 10 years ago, having, this was actually a conversation I had with my husband. He says, I'm just noticing this shift in my patients. This is 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
He's a cardiologist. He says, they just seem so angry. I said, it's interesting that you say that, because I tried to call your office the other day and your phone system has changed. And he said, what are you talking about? So we went and we looked at it, right? And now everyone's is the same, it's the same thing, right? You call, you get an automated thing, it
Mm-hmm.
bumps you to a secretary, then it maybe you get through or you leave a message. And so there's like 19 layers between the patient and the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
The doctor has no idea that those 19 layers, right, have frustrated the patient over and over and over again. And God forbid you miss the call back, right? So there's all of this frustration that and high stress, maybe toxic, right? That's walking in as they walk in,
Mm-hmm.
right? As is all of our frustration and stress walking in as we walk in, because 3 additional patients got dumped into the schedule for today. And, the help, we're down in MA, we're down in RN, we're down this, right? Or the computer system went down again, or it doesn't make any difference.
Yeah.
We all
Yeah.
can name all of those things, cumulative and compounding, and we walk in like this. Okay. So every single one of us has an exquisite threat detection system, right? For simplicity, we're just going to call it our threat detection system. It's the amygdala. It's all kinds of things are going on there. Every single one of us is scanning every nanosecond of every day for those signals that say, I'm safe, I'm not safe.
Mm-hmm.
The higher the stress, the more we are exposed to real or perceived unsafety, the more that is compounded by lack of resources, including time, by high level uncertainty, right? By encounters, by all of the vicarious trauma that we are taking in. This hospital system just got shot up. This whatever just happened over here. All of that begins taking up RAM, right? It's running in the background. We may not be prefrontal cortex aware that that's happening, but it is all happening back here. And the scan goes up and we begin scanning more diligently. The system becomes sensitized to small things.
Yes.
And, right, our cognitive distortions increase. And those cognitive distortions are never distorting towards good stories,
No.
right? I start misinterpreting, misreading facial expressions, tone of voice, the way someone moves. And so is everyone else. That's the thing.
Yep.
It's not just me, it's everyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my threat detection system gets activated. My system says, my amygdala says, you are in danger, right? That system gets activated and it does look like things we don't expect. Looks like anger, looks like flinging a clipboard, right?
Yeah.
It looks like total withdrawal and shutdown.
Yep.
It looks like I'm so stuck, I cannot move.
Yeah.
I can't get anything done. Nothing. And then we start to label it other stuff, depression and things like that, right? And we label it problem physician.
Yep.
Right? We label it all kinds of things. And the biggest challenge is that when my system gets activated and I react, because that's what we're supposed to do, that's what our bodies are supposed to do, right? That activation tends to activate the person across from me, right? If I get really, really angry in an encounter, right? Your capacity to just sit there and be calm and, oh, tell me more, Kemia, is probably not going to be there, especially if we don't know each other. Especially if we don't know each other and you're not practiced in recognizing what's happening in me, right? It's probably going to activate you. And we cycle up. Activation begets activation. This becomes very dangerous because when I'm fully activated, when my threat detection system has decided this is life or death, I do not have access to my prefrontal cortex anymore. Collaborative capacity, decision-making, linear thought, all of that is gone, right? And it's gone for quite a long time, 14 to 23 minutes before I am able to fully come back online. A lot can happen in 14 to 24 minutes, right? Careers are ended, relationships are burned to the ground. And because activation begets activation, sometimes people die.
Yeah.
This is the most important learning and skill development and personal development we can engage in. Because every single human on this planet is neurobiologically hardwired to scan for threat. And we are scanning for both physical threat. We are also scanning for exclusion threat, for social threat. And the brain reads it the same way and it activates the same system and we react from the same place. And we are being exposed to toxic doses of both.
Yeah. Oh, so exhale, everybody. Exhale. I remember distinctly this one time, 20, long time ago. Let's say it. Let's call it 10 years ago, where they asked us to, they were doing a new project and they wanted us to mark this little box whether a patient was a smoker or not. And I'm like, this is a straw that breaks the camel's back. Like, just complete activation over this tiny little thing. Like, exactly what you said, that perspective, completely gone. And we're not even talking about, somebody in the room having their own opinion about the medical system, or you and your 10 minutes with them and you haven't had lunch or water or any of the above.
Yeah.
Just me in my office at 5 p.m. trying so hard to get these inboxes done because I was tired. Just like you said, that difficulty getting started and doing one after the other at this pace when we're being asked to do more. And it was alarming, and you don't realize quite the amount of boil over that's going to have. Like you said, it's that loss of reason. The frontal lobes have just kind of dissolved on you. You've got no ability to step back and get perspective for yourself in that moment. And it becomes so dangerous, like for ourselves. Like you said, you can totally see how it could look like an inconsequential ask from admin, right? Inconsequential. Just tick this other box. And a complete dissolving of experience on the other end.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, this ability to notice what we need and go after it tenaciously, knowing that this is so important and it's within your control. Like you have capacity to pause, create pauses. It doesn't have to be in the busyness of your day. The creating pause, I think, is so important, because the one thing I notice every time I get close to this is I say, I don't have time for that. I don't have time for lunch with my friends. I don't have time for a walk. I don't have time for exercise. I don't have time to go to bed right now. I've got things to do, like my chart, my inboxes, right? Every time I'm put up against that time pressure, personally, my brain says I don't have time for that. And we don't not have time to go after what we need, to create the pause of resourcing to survive this, to create sustainability. This is why I do the work in the world, because I need this reminder too, right? But we all do. The reminder to create sustainability means we need to be our own watcher and have others. I think this is one thing I learned so strongly from you, is who's your spotter?
Yeah.
Who's your
God bless
spotter?
our
Who's the
spotters.
one who kind of says, hey, and my personal one, which I identified when you had said this to me, is, oh, that's why my husband annoys me so much when he says, you're working harder and harder for less and less. And I would get so freaking mad when he would say that statement to me. But I realized during trauma-informed training, personal development, oh, that's my spotter talking.
Yeah.
Who says, hey, you're a little empty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's saying, hey, I love you.
Yeah, exactly. He's saying, you need a break.
Yeah.
I think it's so hard to take a break, but we don't need we don't necessarily need a big break.
Yeah. And you know what? That is the hand to God truth, right?
Right?
That is that is a culturally, I think it is a belief system we've got to begin unwinding. This idea that we grind for 6 months and
Mm-hmm.
somehow are going to restore ourselves or renew ourselves in a 2-week vacation somewhere. Which,
Yeah.
frankly, if you have children or if you're a human being, I think it doesn't make any difference. The end of those 2 weeks, you're more exhausted than you were when you went into them oftentimes, right? And it's a faulty paradigm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rest is not a reward.
Yes.
Rest is not a reward. It is a requirement of being a human being. First of all, it is
Yeah.
also a requirement of this type of work. Listen, as physicians, we are being asked to bear witness to carry responsibility for, to journey with, to accompany with very hard things. Illness and birth and death and everything that is in between. And the rest has to be commensurate with the effort for it to be sustainable.
Yep.
Now, I don't believe in balance. I'm going to
No.
say. I think you've heard me
I don't think
say
it's going to be a
balance.
one-to-one.
Balance is bullshit. And if we spend our lives trying to like figure out how to exactly balance, it's a fool's errand. What we can begin, and it's not the way that organic things operate anyway. But what we can begin to recognize is what's the movement? What's the harmony that I'm trying to seek here, right? I'm in a phase right now of incredible, like hard, very effortful output. And I'm planning for what do I need on the back end, right? And what do I need, and not the back end a year from now, the back end of this momentary efforting, but also like, what do I need in my days? Okay, so I begin to bake more time around things, or I begin to assign certain things a little bit differently, or I certainly just give up on certain things, right? I used to write a little blog called Cereal with Hand Poured Milk. And the whole idea behind it is because I got all these boys eating me out of house and home, and I love to cook. And sometimes, you know what? Dinner is cereal,
Yes.
but at least the milk is hand poured, right? I mean, that's like the best I can do for you, kids. That's the love, is I'll pour the milk myself.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's okay to half-ass certain things.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't have to whole-ass everything. Sometimes half-assing certain things when they're not life and death, when no one is on fire.
That's
The
right.
challenge is, though, as you correctly pointed out, as the stress mounts, as we feel like we are further and further underwater, it becomes harder and harder to discern that. Look how present this is for you 20 years later, right?
Yeah.
And you are so, first of all, I've got any number of stories. You've heard all my stories about losing it at full proportion to what's happening. Right?
Yeah.
And right, this is hospital CEOs, the calls that I received. I'm so stuck. I'm so stuck. I've gotten so many of those. I can't. And then those stories evolve into, and someone made a mistake and I lost control. And I lost control publicly. I won a very high stakes board meeting. Another physician who called me and towards the end of 2023 and said, well, it happened. I became a clipboard flinger. The thing I said I'd never do, right? They made it all, and they're like, why now? We're past all this, over multi-hospital ER system that, had been through the thick of it, had navigated all of that. Why now? That was the question.
Yeah.
Now things are calming down, right?
Yes.
Yeah. It does. And you can't, so what we can know, I can't know what might be the thing that's going to be the straw for you. And you can't know the thing that's going to be the straw for me. That's not the job.
Yeah.
The job is to begin to notice in ourselves first. And then the job is to begin to notice, because once we start to notice our own tells, we start tuning into it with other people, right? Because every single one of us is putting off signals that say, I'm approaching the edge here. And we're not meant to come in and say, oh my gosh, you look like you're approaching the edge. It's just, hey, how you doing, Sarah? Okay. How can I help? What do you need? Is there something? And the reason I think physicians are so shocked by how helpful coaching is because we don't have a lot of spaces where it's safe for us to sit down and just tell our stories from beginning to end. We listen to and we absorb it and we absorb it and we absorb it and we absorb it. And that's the job. And where do we go with what's happening to us? Where do we go with our pain?
Mm-hmm.
And while coaching is not therapy, and I'm a huge proponent of therapy, as you well know, right?
Absolutely. Yep, me too. Yep.
Coaching can be incredibly therapeutic because sometimes we need intensive therapy and intervention and medication, and sometimes we just need safe places to say the things,
Mm,
to vomit the ugly stuff and just leave it there and walk away.
mm. Yeah. Yeah. And give us a little space to have a bit of a perspective on it, right? And to have a little space to decide, what do I need now in order to make this more sustainable for me? That's what I found so helpful with coaching for me first. And then that's what I learned again in a different way, hearing it from a trauma-informed perspective. And that's what I continue to look for when I'm looking for sustainability is, what do we need and how do we create that a little bit? Now, I did want to honor that we have spent time together. I want to ask you, where do people find you if they're interested in doing this work or learning these skills or information development for themselves?
Yeah. So the best place is to go to lodestarpc.com, lodestarpc.com. And you can fill in a little form and it'll make its way to me and I'll reach back out. And or right, you can register for our classes. I think we have a few spaces in our class that's going to launch in September.
Mhm.
Everything else that's on the books right now this year is full, and we may be adding another course in October, November. We really do continue to expand the spaces where we do this. So, at the time you went through, right,
Mhm.
that particular course was for
Coaches.
coaches, right?
Yeah.
So physicians who were coaches, yes, and coaches. And we have these offerings now for physicians who are not coaches, right?
Mhm.
We bring the course and we do sort of standalone, stand-up offerings for organizations as well. And there's a nice chunk of CME associated with it, 20 category 1 CME. And then, of course, if you're a coach going through, we've also got ICF. So we have the only dual accredited
Right.
course out there. So we
Yeah.
try to provide a lot of ways to make this accessible. Yeah, that's the best way to find us.
Excellent. Is there anything we didn't talk about this afternoon that you think could be relevant to my audience? And there's so many things.
So many
So
things,
many things.
so many things. And here's the thing I notice is really coming up for me, right? We are the answer. You and me and everyone else, that's the answer, right? Connection is the best trauma disruptor that we have available to us. Being truly heard and seen and believed without expectation of fixing, right? We don't need to be fixed.
That's important. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So encouragement to you all. Go get connected with your people. For a safe place.
Yes,
Go
connect
have
with
great
your
conversations.
people.
Go find the
Yeah.
time to have a walk or rest. Truly rest. You have the time, even though your brain tells you you don't. Thank you, Dr. K. I really appreciate you being in this space with us. We have so much to learn to help us look after ourselves and to look after our peers and colleagues. But I really appreciate your voice in this space and for us. So thank you.
So grateful for you and the work you're doing. I know you are you're helping so many people. And every time I see or hear your name come up, I just get a little ping of vicarious joy, because that's a real thing too. So thank you for the work you're putting out there.
It's reciprocated. The same for you when I hear you. And I can listen to that podcast. Dr. K giving wisdom to the world. All right, everybody, have a wonderful week. I will see you
Thank
next
you
time.
for the opportunity.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for being part of the Sustainable Clinical Medicine podcast. If you'd like to learn more or join us to help you get home with today's work done, go to chartingcoach.ca. There you'll find all the information on the premier Lifetime Access Charting Champions program that is helping physicians get home with today's work done, with all the proven tools, support, and community you need to create time for your life outside of medicine. We would love to see you there. Until next time, thanks for listening.